The cable at the back of the plane was taut as it dragged a large canvas square with an enormous bullseye painted on it behind the plane. "Head to 2,000 feet, mumbled the officer without opening his eyes. Betty adjusted the flaps, keeping the throttle on full. She eased the joystick forward a little and then banked to the left in a wide circle as she gained altitude. There was little to see below except the lights in the distance of one or possibly two small boats bobbing about in the Atlantic Ocean. Once she reached 2,000 feet, Betty leveled off the plane and proceeded to make a pass over the range where the anti-aircraft gunners were practicing. All at once, an enormous burst of light exploded about 20 yards off the right side of the aircraft. Betty's eyes widened as she realized how close the live shells from the anti-aircraft guns were to the plane. She glanced over at the commanding officer, who was curled up and snoring in his seat. Betty's mind raced. It was her first time pulling targets for gunnery practice. Was this normal? Should she wake the officer and ask him whether shells ought to be exploding so close to the airplane? The officer, like most of the men stationed at Camp Davis, North Carolina, was not very enthusiastic about having women pilots serving there, and Betty worried that he might reprimand her for being a nervous woman if she woke him. Another burst of gunfire exploded beside them. This time it was close enough to light up the entire cockpit with an eerie glow. Betty decided that no matter what the commanding officer said, she was going to wake him. Just then, another burst of gunfire whizzed past the plane. As it did so, the officer sat bolt upright. "What was that?" he yelled. "Shells are exploding all around us. Is that normal?" Betty asked. Normal, the officer spluttered. "Some fool down there is aiming right at us and not the target. What are they trying to do, shoot us down?" Frantically, the officer reached for the radio. He barked some orders into the microphone, and within 2 minutes, the shells had stopped exploding around the Lockheed B-34. Betty breathed a sigh of relief and noticed the officer seemed to have suddenly lost interest in sleeping. Betty made several more passes over the anti-aircraft gunnery range. This time, the gunners' sights were aimed on the target being towed behind and not on the B-34 itself. As she flew, Betty marveled at how she was fulfilling her childhood dream to one day fly. She was a member of the Women Air Force Service Pilots. She flew military aircraft in logistical and support roles, and her accomplishments in the air were helping America's war effort. Yet she also had a higher purpose for her flying. Being a part of the Women Air Force Service Pilots was just a stepping stone on the path to achieving her real goal, combining her love of God with her love of flying to serve others. But that night, it all seemed to her a long way from the life she had known growing up in Seattle on the shores of Lake Washington. Chapter 2. A Great Aviator. 8-year-old Betty Greene pushed a strand of long brown hair out of her eyes and peered upward for a glimpse of the spirit of St. Louis. She had read everything she could about Charles Lindbergh and his amazing flight from Long Island, New York, to Paris. She had to pinch herself to remind herself she really was in the stadium at the University of Washington, waiting with thousands of other excited people for her hero to fly overhead. Betty wiggled a little closer to her oldest brother, Joe. Even though Joe was 16 years old, Betty felt they were buddies. After all, the two of them shared a love for planes. Joe already had a pilot's license, having flown solo at 14, and Betty could hardly wait to follow in his footsteps. An eerie hush fell over the crowd. Then Betty heard it, the buzz of an airplane engine in the distance. The sound grew steadily louder. Betty squinted into the sun.